Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking more about Shadowlands. We'll be talking about the return of Legendaries and the Legendary system. Blizzard wants to bring back Legendaries for the things that they were, but change them dramatically in terms of how they are acquired. In this video, I also want to talk a bit about the place where you will acquire the materials for the Legendaries, but also about the place that will be part of the bigger pieces of content in Shadowlands called the Tower of Torghast. The tower that will be located in the Maw, the ever-changing, never-ending experience with a variety of content that can have a procedurally generated layout. So let's talk about everything that we'll have here for Shadowlands. So one of the more surprising things with Shadowlands being announced is the fact that Blizzard does want to bring Legendaries back into the game. They added Legendaries as part of the basic pieces of content for everybody to enjoy with Legion. Legion made Legendaries more of a useful piece of gear, not a unique rare item that was either really rare and overpowered once you acquired it, either through a very long complicated quest system before Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor, where they made Legendaries part of the regular endgame content. You will build up on a cloak or a ring, and as the expansion goes on towards the very last raid, you will have your cloak or ring legendary status as in fully finished, almost like a fully upgraded. So Legendaries have changed a big time along the way, but in Legion they were introduced as part of a piece of content very similar to Diablo 3 Legendary system. In Diablo 3 there's a lot of different weapons and armor that have legendary effects to them. Now the weapons and armor generally are good, but you're trying to find the best effect that suits your build. Diablo is filled with a billion legendaries, it feels like, and there's a legendary for every build. In Legion, they decided to flood the game full of legendaries, and certain legendaries were top tier in specific builds, while others were more of a general use. But they were customizable, and specs and certain classes needed specific legendaries in order to be competitive. Some of these legendaries did offer you quite a change of gameplay. Did you want to be a little bit more tankier when it comes to doing dungeons, solo content, or maybe even tackling the mage tower? You could go with a necklace that gave you an absorb shield. Do you want to play around to your strengths for maybe crowd control every time you're able to interrupt an enemy or dispel them? Then a legendary of Pride As was really good because it gave you a massive haste buff. Of course, you also had class-specific legendaries. For rogues, we had the shoulders. Every time you start out of stealth on an enemy for the next 5 seconds, you have a 100% critical strike chance. That meant that your Vantage became an offensive ability in dungeons and raids rather than a defensive ability, making it so much more powerful. Legendaries were so game-changing, some of them even became talent options for certain classes and specs for us to choose from. That's how impactful to the gameplay they were. So they were kind of cool in the idea, but Legendaries also still had a major drawback. Legendaries were very RNG. You never really knew how you were to acquire them, at least at the beginning of the expansion. Eventually, Blizzard did add catch-up mechanisms so we could buy specific legendaries, but by then, there's a good chance you had all the legendaries that your character needed. It was more of a catch-up mechanism for alts and stuff. So the legendary system was nowhere near perfect. It was actually quite ridiculously bad at first. But once you acquired the needed legendaries for your class, they felt pretty good to play, and being able to switch out legendaries depending on the content that you were doing was quite fun. So Blizzard wants to bring back legendaries through the Torghast tower and the crafting system. So instead of earning legendaries through random chance, we'll actually be able to craft them. That's one of the biggest things they wanted to accomplish in this expansion, is to change how you acquire them, because most people like the legendaries, they like the idea in terms of the gameplay that it offered, but not how you acquired them. And what they're doing with it too is they mentioned that they want to make it more of a crafting piece of content. You get specific materials and you craft a specific legendary. You get to choose the stats on the thing, you get to choose the effect, how powerful the effect is. So the stronger the effect, I would think, the stronger the stats. We don't have any details on how the system will function, but I personally like that idea. Legendaries themselves on their own weren't terrible. In fact, they offer quite a bit of variance to gameplay depending on your class. The best part was having a bunch of these legendaries and being able to figure out what kind of a build you wanted, if you wanted to adjust your build at all. But also what was fun is once you have the best in slot legendaries, your specialization felt full. You had your tier bonus, you had your best trinkets, you had your best legendaries, you had your weapon upgraded. It was quite fun. The not fun part about it was the RNG aspect and having to deal with legendaries that you are given. It also forced players into doing more content for hopes that you finally get a random legendary drop. So you did every emissary, you did every dungeon, you did every raid, whether it's LFR, normal, heroic, because anything could have dropped you a legendary. But in a system that they want to do for Shadowlands, they want to make it so that you choose which legendary you craft. You choose which effect you want. What's also cool about the legendaries coming in Shadowlands, we're going to be using the same forge that created the Frostmourne as the forge to craft our pieces of loot. So there's a good possibility that that will offer quite a variety of transmog features to collect all the gear from the forge that will be legendary. Will probably have a different appearance to it. So if you're someone who's a big collector and you love transmog, one of your goals for this expansion might be to create at least one type of legendary for each piece of gear, so you can have a full legendary attire for transmog in the future. So I personally think this is kind of cool. It offers quite a few different pieces of content. The main question is, how do you acquire the legendaries? And this is where I want to take a bit of time to talk about another feature being added into Shadowlands called the Tower of Torghast. Torghast is going to be a new piece of content that we'll be able to explore come Shadowlands. The way that Blizzard described it is it's a rogue-like experience, and if any of you never played any rogue-like games, think of a game where you would, let's say, go from level to level to level. Every time you kill a boss, you get to upgrade your character in a weird way. Something like a Binding of Isaac would be a good example. Binding of Isaac would let you upgrade your character through randomized buffs, randomized add-ons, randomized ways that change your character. And with these random buffs, you would try to figure out the best way to make a build. So Tower of Torghast is going to be you climbing this tower. Every level gets harder and harder and harder, and the idea is you're supposed to earn buffs as you climb the tower to make your experience inside easier. The buffs can vary from damage buffs like increase to mastery or raw damage increases to defensive buffs, maybe damage procs, and it's supposed to have different synergies. Some of these buffs can also be related to your class, to your role, to also your covenant. So you'll have covenant specific or covenant themed based abilities for the Tower of Torghast. The enemies inside the tower is very similar to like Mythic Pluses. Every time you climb a level, they get harder and harder and harder. So the idea is you want to utilize the buffs that you have, find a way through the randomized buffs that you get to make some sort of a build in order to help you continue further and further into the tower. Some levels are going to have a billion enemies. Some levels are going to have less enemies, but they're going to be harder. Every level is supposed to be slightly different than the next, and they are all procedurally generated. So you don't always have exactly the same idea of what the next level is going to give you every time you go into the tower, which should give it more replayability. This feature is also basically Mage Tower 2.0 in a sense. You can do that solo, so you can explore the Tower of Torghast by yourself. I would think a tank or a DPS would be a great option to do so, but it can also be done with up to 5 people. So you can have you and a friend, maybe a 3-party group, maybe just 4 people, or 5 if you decide to do so. And you guys can all be different roles, so in a 5-man group, having a healer, tank, and 3 DPS will probably be the best. But if you have a group of, let's say, 2, 3, or 4, you can adjust your party depending on the classes that you all play. With Blizzard adding more class abilities and bringing back more abilities back to classes, maybe being a hybrid like a Retribution Paladin or Enhancement Shaman and having some healing capability in order to not have somebody go full-on healer in a Tower of Torghast could be quite fun. The buffs apply to you and your party, and certain buffs can be shared between one another. So the replayability of this could be quite good, and through Tower of Torghast, and the better you do in the tower is where you will earn materials in order to craft these legendaries. The Tower of Torghast is going to be similar to Islands, but not completely awful and not fun. Islands were fun for a little bit, and maybe if you're someone who loves getting mounts and getting pieces of transmogs and pets and stuff and toys, maybe you like the Islands for that feature, but Islands themselves are pretty boring. But it's supposed to be island-like experience, as in every time you go to the island, it changes what enemies are on there. So Blizzard already has this randomization technology. They just simply want to take it from instead of using it on an island, rather for every level of the Tower of Torghast. Not all the levels are going to be completely randomized, so it's not like you're just going to go from, like, let's say, a room with the easiest mobs to the next room and just get obliterated by the hardest enemies you've ever seen in the game that have some insane buff. They're all handcrafted, but there's so many different types of levels that are handcrafted that it should give you enough variance in the gameplay. Plus, also the various buffs that you earn as you climb the Tower of Torghast should give you a variance in the gameplay as well, whether you are climbing it solo or with friends. So one moment you might have a build where you have some crazy synergy with one another, and another time you do the Tower of Torghast, you might have separate synergies, like something you can do, something your friend can do, but they don't quite work together as well. So it can give you different varied experience. And what also Blizzard needs to do, and this is what they want to do, is they need to add other rewards inside of Tower of Torghast in order to give the content replayability. Just because it's varied and just because you can get your legendaries from it, once you have all the legendaries you might want from the Tower of Torghast, maybe you might want to do it more for other reasons. That's what Blizzard really needs to establish, is some of the other reasons to do Tower of Torghast. Again, they don't have every nitty-gritty detail on it yet, and probably more to come once we hit the beta, alpha, and once people are able to explore it. And I'm pretty sure Blizzard is going to talk more about this feature because it is very, very new. And to promote a feature that's very new as early as possible, I think would be a great idea. So hopefully Tower of Torghast ends up being successful, but in this video I wanted to make sure to cover the legendary system as well as the Tower of Torghast, and hopefully I give you guys all the information you all need. I'm very excited about Shadowlands, very excited in how they're going to do the legendaries. I like the idea that you instead craft legendaries rather than get them in complete RNG. And they mentioned it's going to be function very similar to the Mechagon Trinket slots, so you'll be able to choose which slots certain legendary effects and even stats go into your piece of loot, which I think is going to change the game dramatically. Hopefully the legendary effects will be quite powerful, or at least very similar to what Legion had in terms of the gameplay capabilities. Since we are losing our essences and our artifact Azeroth traits, then we need to have some other system to fill those gaps, and legendaries would be a great way to do it because you can swap them on the fly in dungeons and raids. I just wanted to say real quick towards the end of the video, thank you guys so much for the amazing support. This BlizzCon has been super fun to watch, and your guys' support on the channel has been incredible. I really do appreciate it. I want to do more Shadowlands videos. I'm going to cover all the topics that I'm super interested in, so not going to cover everything, but if you guys feel like there's something I should cover, let me know in the comments what I should talk about next, and what can I present you in terms of the video, and the footage, and the content, and the details that we have right now. Cannot wait for Blizzard to announce us more stuff about Shadowlands in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.